Hey everyone! If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and every single one of you makes a huge difference. Join the community, drop a like, and let's make this journey epic together. Thanks for the support. I never truly lived until I turned 55. That thought hit me harder than I expected as I stood alone in my basement, surrounded by dusty boxes and forgotten memories. For years, I told myself I had everything I needed: a stable home, a loving husband, a quiet routine. But now, as my fingers traced the edges of an old photo, I realized how much of life I had let slip through my fingers. The picture was from decades ago, a summer beach party. There I was, young and carefree, laughing with a margarita in hand, wearing a bright orange bikini that left little to the imagination. My skin glowed under the sun, my hair wild and untamed by the wind. I barely recognized myself. That version of me felt like a stranger, a ghost of someone who once lived freely, without hesitation or regret. A deep ache settled in my chest. Where had she gone? Just then, a sound from the basement door startled me. I turned quickly, clutching the album to my chest, only to see Lucas, the neighbor boy I used to babysit, standing at the top of the stairs. His once youthful face had matured into something new, stronger, sharper, with a quiet confidence that sent a flutter through me. "Lucas?" My voice trembled, both from surprise and something deeper I couldn't quite place. "Wow," he said, shaking his head with a half-smile, his eyes still fixed on the photo. "It's strange to think of you like this, but impressive." His words hung in the air, charged with an energy I hadn't expected. My heart beat a little faster, and I felt the pull of something long dormant. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was something else, something deeper, stirring beneath the surface. He wasn't just admiring a photo anymore. It felt like he was seeing me in a way that no one had in years, like he was seeing not just the woman I had become, but the woman I once was, and maybe even the woman I still was inside, waiting to break free. The room suddenly felt warmer, tighter. The way he was looking at me, the intensity in his gaze, made me shift uncomfortably in my seat. And yet, there was a flicker of excitement in me, something that hadn't been touched in far too long. I couldn't let myself get lost in that feeling, could I? But before I could brush it off, before I could distance myself from the moment, he reached out. His hand was gentle at first, almost hesitant, but when he placed it over mine, I couldn't ignore the warmth that spread up my arm. His fingers, calloused and strong, enveloped mine, and for a heartbeat, we just stayed there, holding hands in a way that felt far more intimate than it should have. "We should look at these," he murmured, his voice lower now, softer. The air between us had shifted. It felt like he wasn't just looking at the pictures anymore, he was looking at me, the woman sitting right next to him, the one who'd once held him as a child, but was now something entirely different. "I mean, I've never seen you like this before, so young, so full of life. It's kind of amazing." His words wrapped around me, pulling me closer, even though I was sitting right next to him. My breath caught in my throat. The way he said, "full of life," it sounded like he was saying something more, something unspoken. I wasn't sure what to do with the way he was looking at me, like he was trying to peel back the layers, revealing a side of me I had buried for years. But then, the heat of his hand on mine made my skin tingle, and a knot twisted in my stomach, tightening with a kind of delicious tension. I took a shaky breath, forcing a small laugh. "All right," I said, trying to sound light, but there was something in my voice now, a hint of something I couldn't quite name. "But don't say I didn't warn you. Some of these might be a bit much." Lucas chuckled, the sound warm and rich, wrapping around me like a caress. It sent a thrill through my chest, making my pulse quicker. As he settled beside me on the old chest, the space between us shrank even further, until the heat from his body pressed against mine. I could smell him now, something earthy, like musk and sandalwood, with just a trace of something faintly sweet. My senses felt sharper, more aware, as if the very air between us was charged. I had to force myself to breathe as he took the album into his lap, his legs brushing mine, his warmth seeping into my skin. His fingers brushed mine again, lingering longer this time, as if he were savoring the touch. It was casual, sure, but the spark between us was anything but. Each brush of his fingers against my skin felt deliberate, like a quiet invitation. We flipped through the pages slowly, taking our time. The musty scent of old paper mixed with the weight of silence that seemed to hang in the air. The carefree beach photos we had lingered on now gave way to other images, college nights spent in neon-lit clubs, dancing without care, laughing in ways I couldn't remember, feeling so free anymore. One photo in particular caught his attention, one where I was wearing a sleek red dress that hugged my curves just so, spinning in the glow of the city lights. The photograph had captured me mid-laughter, but it was the look in my eyes that I couldn't ignore. It was a kind of recklessness, a kind of freedom I had left behind. Lucas didn't just look at the photo. He studied it, his gaze lingering on the image of me, and then slowly, that gaze shifted to me, his eyes darker now, his lips parting as if to say something he couldn't quite voice. I felt a heat rise in me, but it wasn't from the photo anymore. It was from the way he was looking at me, like he could see past the years, past the routines, and straight into the core of who I used to be, who I could still be. "Is that really you?" he asked, his voice low and almost reverent. I nodded, though it was hard to breathe. His eyes were making it impossible to think straight. There was something so intimate in the way he watched me, something raw and open that made my heart race, made my body hum with awareness. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "That was me, once." Lucas's lips curled into a slow smile. "I like this version of you," he said, his words quiet, but the weight of them hit me like a wave. I think I'd like to know her again." The way he said it made me shiver. There was no doubt in his tone, no question. It wasn't just a compliment. It felt like an invitation, an unspoken promise. And for the first time in years, I considered taking that invitation. "This really doesn't feel real," Lucas admitted, his voice barely a whisper, as though the words themselves carried a weight he was only now allowing to settle. "I've always known you as, well, you are now. But seeing you like this, like a completely different person, it's kind of incredible." The warmth in his voice stirred something deep inside me. I let out a small laugh, though there was an unfamiliar heat spreading through me, a heat that wasn't just from the musty basement air. "It was just youth," I said, trying to sound light, but the words felt hollow even as they left my lips. "Everything feels different when you're young. You think you have all the time in the world." But Lucas's gaze never wavered from mine, the intensity in his eyes pulling me in, making the room feel smaller, the air heavier. He leaned in slightly, the subtle shift of his body making my pulse quicken. Then, his voice low, deliberate, cut through the charged silence. "You still have time, you know." Surprised by the sincerity in his words, I turned to meet his gaze, my heart suddenly thudding in my chest. There was something in the way he looked at me, a quiet, almost reverent understanding. His eyes seemed to see me in a way that no one ever had, beyond the surface of who I had been or who I thought I was. "You talk about the past like it's locked away forever," he said, his voice softer now, a trace of something raw in the way he spoke. "But you're still that same person. Just because life happened doesn't mean you can't still do the things that made you happy." His words hit me harder than I expected, sinking deep into the part of me I'd kept hidden for so long. I had always believed that the wildness of my youth was a thing of the past, lost in the haze of time. But Lucas's gaze, the way he spoke with such certainty, made me question everything. Maybe I had been the one holding myself back all this time. Lucas closed the album, his fingers brushing the edge of the pages, sending a small shiver down my spine. He handed it back to me, his touch lingering a moment longer than necessary. "I think Robert was lucky to have you," he said, his voice warm, yet carrying a depth that left me breathless. "But I also think there's still a lot left for you to do. You're not just a memory in a photo album, Vivian. You're still here." The words settled over me, like a soft breath of wind. They stayed with me, wrapping around my heart, igniting something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Maybe it wasn't too late to find that part of me again. Maybe I wasn't done exploring, not done discovering who I was, or who I could be. As he looked at me, his gaze never left mine. I felt the air between us grow thick. The space we shared seemed to pulse with a strange energy, an unspoken tension that neither of us acknowledged, but both of us felt. There was something about his presence that made me feel alive again, as if all the years of quiet routine had faded, leaving only this moment with this electric connection. His voice, when he spoke again, was quieter, almost a murmur. "Vivian," he said, his tone smooth, like a slow caress. "After seeing all those pictures, I have to say, you haven't aged a day. You still look young, vibrant, absolutely beautiful." His words hung in the air, hanging heavy with meaning. Even in my youth, I wasn't used to hearing such things, especially not from Robert. But Lucas's words felt different. They were genuine, laden with admiration, and something more, something deeper, more intimate. I felt my cheeks flush, the heat creeping up my neck, my heart suddenly racing faster than before. "Thank you, Lucas," I murmured, tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear, this simple gesture feeling more intimate now than I ever thought it could. But there's no hiding the fact that I've aged. Lucas didn't look away. Instead, his gaze deepened, becoming more intense, more focused, as if he was studying me in a way no one ever had. His lips parted slightly, and I could feel the change in the air, the way everything seemed to slow down, the space between us narrowing with every passing second. He reached out again, his fingers brushing against mine. The touch was light, almost tentative, but it ignited a spark inside me, a jolt of electricity that traveled up my arm, down my spine. I had to fight the urge to pull away, but something in me wanted to feel more of him, to feel what this strange new pull between us meant. "You don't have to hide anything, Vivian," he whispered, his voice now barely a breath. "Not from me. Not anymore." The words, quiet, soft, but laden with something deeper, sent a wave of heat through me. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, all I could do was stare at him, my heart pounding. The tension between us was thick, almost tangible, and I couldn't deny the way my body responded to his nearness. The warmth of his hand, the intensity in his eyes, the soft, steady rhythm of his breath, it all combined to make me feel alive in a way I hadn't in so long. His thumb brushed over my knuckles, sending a shiver down my spine, his touch gentle but certain. The room seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of us, caught in a moment that felt like it was suspended in time. I didn't know where this was leading, didn't know what it meant, but the pull between us was undeniable. It was as if everything in my body was drawing me closer to him, urging me to explore whatever this connection was, whatever it could become. I wasn't sure if I could keep pretending. I didn't feel it, the heat between us, the electricity that crackled in the air when he touched me, the way his eyes held me captive. I wasn't sure where this moment would lead, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't ready to pull away. The silence between us lingered as Lucas disappeared up the stairs, leaving me standing in the dimly lit basement, my mind racing. The way he had spoken to me, soft yet commanding, had left a mark. There was something in his presence, something magnetic, that pulled at me in a way I hadn't felt in years. I found myself drawn to the photo album again, though I barely noticed the pictures anymore. My thoughts were consumed by the way Lucas looked at me. The way his gaze had lingered on me, intense and full of meaning. I could feel the heat of his eyes even now, despite the space between us. It was as if he could see inside me, seeing things I'd hidden away for far too long. I shook my head, trying to rid myself of the thoughts, but they clung to me. I'd spent so much of my life locked away in a world of responsibilities and routines, never daring to indulge in what I truly wanted. But Lucas, he made me feel alive again. Like there was still so much of me left to discover. The person I had been, and the woman I was becoming now. When Lucas returned, his presence filled the room, and the air between us seemed to thicken with a quiet anticipation. He moved with such ease, his steps steady and confident, and the way he looked at me, it was different now. There was a glimmer in his eyes, something that said he wasn't just here to help with the basement anymore. His gaze had softened, yet it held a new intensity, an undeniable connection between us. He didn't speak immediately, but instead approached me slowly, his footsteps deliberate, each one measured like he was drawing me in. When he stopped just a few feet away, the space between us felt charged, like the air itself was crackling with energy. He reached out, his fingers brushing a loose strand of hair from my face, the touch light, almost hesitant, but still there. "You're still beautiful, Vivian," he said again, his voice low, almost a whisper. The words seemed to hang in the air, filling the space between us, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I had heard compliments before, but there was something different about his. They weren't just words, they were a reflection of the way he saw me, the way he made me feel, as though every inch of me mattered to him. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice a little breathless. The warmth from his touch lingered on my skin, and I couldn't help but shiver slightly. Was it the chill in the basement, or was it the way he made me feel? If you've made it this far, I know my story has left an impact on you. There's so much more to share, and you won't want to miss any of it. Make sure to hit that follow button, turn on notifications, and leave a comment about this story. I can't wait to hear your thoughts, so let's chat in the comments. Your support means the world to me.